The lock clicked behind me with a sound that felt permanent, final, like a door closing on a life I'd never get back. I stood on the porch with 2 garbage bags full of clothes and a backpack containing my laptop, my phone charger, and $300 in cash. It was October, and the night air had teeth. My father stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow of the house I'd grown up in. He didn't look angry. He looked relieved. "You're 18 now, Ethan," he said. "You're a legal adult. We've done our part. The rest is up to you." My mother stood behind him, arms crossed, saying nothing. She'd stopped looking at me 3 days earlier when I told them I wasn't going to medical school, that I wanted to study computer science instead, that I'd already accepted a scholarship to a state university 2 hours away. They'd given me a choice: follow their plan or leave. I chose to leave. I thought they were bluffing. They weren't. My younger brother Marcus watched from the stairs, his face pale. He was 16. I tried to catch his eye, tried to send him some message that this wasn't his fault, that he should keep his head down and survive. But he turned away before I could. The door closed. I heard the deadbolt slide into place. Then the porch light went out, and I was standing in the dark. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 32 now, and 4 years ago, I became my parents' landlord. They don't know it yet, but they're about to. Let me tell you how this happened. Not because I need you to feel sorry for me, I don't, but because the story only makes sense if you understand where I started. The house I was thrown out of sits on Maple Ridge Drive in a quiet suburb outside Portland. It's a 3-bedroom colonial with white siding and black shutters. My father, Robert Cole, bought it in 1998 for $220,000. He was a sales manager at a pharmaceutical company. My mother, Linda, worked as a part-time accountant. They were comfortable. Not wealthy, but stable. I was their first child. Marcus came 2 years later. From the beginning, my parents had a plan for us. Medical school for me, law school for Marcus. Prestigious careers, respectable professions. A clear path to success that they'd map out and we'd follow without question. I was good at science. I made excellent grades. I got into advanced placement classes without trying too hard. My parents took this as confirmation that their plan was working. They didn't ask what I wanted. They told me what I would become. But by the time I was 16, I'd discovered something that interested me more than anatomy or chemistry. I'd taught myself to code. I spent hours writing small programs, building websites for friends, learning everything I could about software development. It felt like solving puzzles, like creating something from nothing. It felt right. When I told my parents I wanted to study computer science, my father laughed. "That's a hobby, Ethan, not a career. You'll be a doctor. We've already started saving for medical school." I tried to explain that technology was the future, that software engineers were in high demand, that I could build a career doing something I actually loved. They didn't want to hear it. My mother said I was being selfish. My father said I was wasting my potential. The argument escalated over months. By my senior year, it had become a wall between us. When I got the scholarship offer, full tuition to Portland State for computer science, I thought they'd be proud. I thought they'd at least acknowledge that someone other than them believed in my choice. Instead, they gave me an ultimatum: medical school or nothing. Their support or the street. I called their bluff, and I lost. That first night, I slept in my car, a 2003 Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and a broken passenger seat. I'd bought it myself working summers at a grocery store. It was mine, at least, something they couldn't take away. The next day, I drove to campus and explained my situation to the financial aid office. They helped me apply for emergency housing. Within a week, I had a room in a dormitory and a work-study job shelving books in the library. I ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. I wore the same 3 outfits in rotation. I studied in every free moment I had because I knew I couldn't afford to fail. I didn't contact my parents. They didn't contact me. My brother tried once, sending me a Facebook message. "Are you okay?" I told him I was fine. He didn't respond after that. I assumed they'd told him not to. College was brutal. Not academically, I thrived in my classes, but financially, emotionally, it hollowed me out. I watched other students complain about their meal plans while I was calculating whether I could afford to eat 3 times that day. I watched them go home for holidays while I worked double shifts at a campus cafe to make rent. But I learned something during those years. I learned that I could survive on my own, that I didn't need their approval to build something real. By my junior year, I'd started freelancing. Small projects at first, building websites for local businesses, designing apps for startups. I worked through nights and weekends, sleeping 4 hours and running on coffee and spite. By the time I graduated, I had $15,000 saved and a portfolio that spoke for itself. I got hired by a tech company in Seattle 3 weeks after graduation. Starting salary, $75,000 a year. I cried when I got the offer letter. Not because it was a lot of money, though it was more than I'd ever imagined having, but because it proved I'd been right. That the path I chose was real. I moved to Seattle and threw myself into the work. I was good at it. Really good. I got promoted within 18 months. By the time I turned 25, I was a senior developer making 6 figures. I bought my first property that year, a small condo in a neighborhood that was just starting to gentrify. I lived in it for a year, then rented it out when I moved to a better place. I started studying real estate. Not because I wanted to be a landlord, but because I wanted to understand how wealth actually worked, how people built security, how you could create income streams that weren't tied to trading hours for dollars. I bought another property, then another. By 27, I had 6 rental units across Seattle and Portland. I worked with a property manager who handled the day-to-day details while I focused on my tech career. I wasn't rich yet, but I was building something solid. Then one day, my property manager sent me a listing. A house in foreclosure just outside Portland. The address caught my eye immediately. Maple Ridge Drive. I opened the photos. White siding, black shutters, 3 bedrooms, a front porch I'd stood on with garbage bags full of my life. It was my childhood home. I sat at my desk for 20 minutes, staring at the listing. The house had been foreclosed on 3 months earlier. According to public records, my parents had taken out a home equity loan in 2015 and defaulted on payments in 2019. The bank had taken possession. Now it was on the market, priced below value for a quick sale. I called my property manager. "I want to see this one." "That's outside our usual area," she said. "You sure?" "I'm sure." We toured it the next day. It was strange walking through those rooms again after nearly a decade. The walls were the same color. The kitchen tile was the same, but it felt smaller, shabbier. The carpet was worn. The paint was chipped. It needed work. The real estate agent, a tired-looking woman named Sandra, walked me through the details. Previous owners couldn't keep up with the payments. It's a shame, really. They'd lived here for over 20 years. "Where are they now?" I asked. "Renting a place across town, I think. These foreclosures are hard on families." I made an offer that afternoon. Full asking price, cash, close in 2 weeks. The bank accepted immediately. I didn't tell my property manager who the previous owners were. I didn't tell anyone. I just signed the paperwork, transferred the funds, and waited for the closing date. When the house became mine, I had it professionally cleaned and repaired. New carpet, fresh paint, fixed the leaking bathroom faucet my father had ignored for years. I replaced the back deck boards that had rotted through. I made it better than it had been when I lived there. Then I listed it for rent. Market rate. 3-bedroom colonial, recently renovated, quiet neighborhood. Available immediately. I got 15 applications in the first week. I reviewed each one carefully, running credit checks and employment verification like I did for all my properties. Most were decent candidates, but there was one application that stood out. Robert and Linda Cole. Combined income of $92,000. Credit score 620. Previous rental reference satisfactory. Current lease ending in 30 days. They were applying to rent their own house, and they had no idea I owned it. I stared at their application for a long time. I could reject it. I could choose someone else, let them move on, never know that I'd been the one reviewing their financial history. It would be clean, simple. The universe settling a debt without anyone acknowledging it. But I didn't reject it. I approved it. I sent the standard lease agreement to my property manager and told her to process everything normally. They signed the lease without ever knowing who their landlord was. The property was held in an LLC I'd created for my rental portfolio. My name appeared nowhere on their paperwork. They moved in on November 1st. I watched from my car down the street as the moving truck pulled up. My father looked older, grayer. My mother moved slowly, carefully, like someone who'd learned that things could break. Marcus wasn't with them. I found out later he'd gone to community college and moved to California for work. He'd escaped, at least. For the first 6 months, everything was normal. They paid rent on time. They followed the lease terms. My property manager handled all communication. They were model tenants, and I was a ghost. Then, in month 7, the rent was late. 3 days. Then a week. Then my property manager called. "The tenants at Maple Ridge are having issues," she said. "They're asking for a payment extension. Something about unexpected medical bills." "What kind of extension?" 2 weeks. They say they'll have it by the 15th. I could have said yes immediately. I could have said no. Instead, I asked, "What's our policy?" "We usually grant one extension if they've been reliable. After that, we start the late fee process." "Follow the policy," I said. They paid on the 15th. A late fee was added per the lease terms. $50. The next month, rent was on time. The month after that, late again. This time by 5 days. The pattern continued. Some months on time, some months late. Never late enough to trigger eviction proceedings, but enough to establish a trend. My property manager started mentioning it on our monthly calls. "These tenants are struggling," she said. "You might want to consider whether we should start looking for someone more stable." "Not yet," I said. "Let's see how it plays out." What she didn't know was that I'd started researching my parents' financial situation. Public records showed the medical bills were real. My father had needed surgery for a herniated disc. But there was more. Credit card debt. A car loan they were behind on. A pattern of living just slightly beyond their means. The same pattern that had cost them the house in the first place. They were failing again. Slower this time, but the trajectory was clear. Then, 2 months ago, my property manager called with a different kind of problem. "The Coles are requesting a lease modification," she said. "They want to add a clause about long-term occupancy. Essentially, they want assurance they won't be evicted if the property sells." Why would they think it's selling? They've seen other houses in the neighborhood go up for sale. They're worried. They mentioned they used to own this house and they're emotionally attached. They want stability. I sat with that information for a while. Emotionally attached. To the house they'd owned outright until they'd borrowed against it. The house they'd lost because they couldn't manage their finances. The house they'd thrown me out of because I wouldn't follow their plan. Tell them we'll consider it, I said. But I want to meet with them first. You want to meet with the tenants? Yes. Schedule it for next week. Tell them the property owner wants to discuss the request in person. There was a pause. That's unusual, but okay. I'll set it up. The meeting is tomorrow, 3 o'clock, at the house on Maple Ridge Drive. They still don't know who I am. They think they're meeting with a property investor to discuss their lease terms. They have no idea that the person who owns their home, who reviews their rent checks, who decides whether they stay or go, is the son they threw away a decade ago. I've been thinking about what I'm going to say, whether I should tell them immediately or let them figure it out on their own, whether I should be kind or cold or something in between. The truth is, I don't want revenge. I'm not doing this to hurt them, but I'm not doing it to save them either. What I want is for them to see me, really see me. Not as the disappointing son who wouldn't follow orders, not as the failure they predicted I'd become, but as the person who survived their rejection and built something anyway. I want them to sit across from me in their rented living room, my living room, and understand that the life they're living now exists because I allow it, that the stability they're begging for is mine to grant or withhold. I want them to realize that the path they said would lead nowhere brought me here, to this moment, where I hold every card and they hold none. Last night, I drove past the house. The lights were on. I could see my mother through the kitchen window, washing dishes. My father was sitting in the living room, probably watching television. They looked small, tired, human. I thought about the night they locked me out. How certain they were that I was making a mistake. How convinced they were that their way was the only way. They were wrong. Completely wrong. And tomorrow, at 3 o'clock, they're going to understand exactly how wrong they were. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to list their failures or make them apologize. I'm just going to sit down, look them in the eye, and say my name. Everything else will follow from that. Because here's what I've learned in the 10 years since that door closed behind me. Power isn't about revenge. It's about position. It's about being the one who decides what happens next. It's about standing in a room you own while someone else asks permission to stay. Tomorrow, I walk into that house as the landlord, as the person who decides whether they get their long-term lease or a notice to vacate, as the person who controls the one piece of stability they have left. They made me leave with nothing. Now, they're the ones with nothing. And I'm the one holding everything. That's not revenge. That's just gravity. Some people rise, some people fall. And sometimes, the person you threw out comes back as the one who owns the ground you're standing on. Tomorrow, at 3 o'clock, they'll open the door and see their son standing on the porch. And this time, I'm the one who decides whether that door stays open. I've spent the last week preparing for this meeting. Not emotionally. I've been preparing for that for 10 years. But practically, I've reviewed every detail of their tenancy, every payment record, every maintenance request. I've memorized the lease terms. I've consulted with my lawyer about what I can and cannot say, about the legal boundaries of this situation. What I've realized is that I don't need to do anything dramatic. The situation itself is dramatic enough. This morning, I put on a suit, navy blue, well-tailored, expensive. The kind of suit that says, "This is someone who made it." I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone my 18-year-old self wouldn't recognize. Someone confident. Someone who'd earned every dollar, every property, every moment of stability. I drove to Maple Ridge Drive slowly. I arrived 15 minutes early and parked down the street. I sat in my car, watching the house, thinking about all the years I'd lived inside those walls. The child I'd been, the teenager who'd fought for his own future, the young man who'd walked away with garbage bags and hope. At exactly 3 o'clock, I walked up to the front door. I rang the doorbell. I heard footsteps inside, slow and cautious. The door opened. My father stood there, older than I remembered, hair more gray than brown now. He was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, casual, comfortable, at home. He looked at me. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, confusion, maybe recognition, but not quite, like seeing a face you almost know. "Mr. Cole?" I said. "I'm Ethan Cole, the property owner. We have a meeting scheduled." The confusion cleared. Recognition hit him like cold water. He went pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Behind him, I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen. "Robert? Who is it?" He couldn't answer. He just stood there, staring at me, his hand still on the door like he was thinking about closing it, but couldn't quite commit to the action. I stepped forward slightly. "May I come in? We have business to discuss." That broke the paralysis. He stepped back mechanically. And I walked into the house I used to live in, the house I now own. My mother appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She froze when she saw me. The towel dropped to the floor. "Ethan?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Hello, Mom." I kept my tone professional, neutral. "Should we sit down? We have some lease terms to discuss." I walked into the living room without waiting for permission. I sat down in the armchair, the good one, the one my father always claimed. I pulled out my folder of documents and set them on the coffee table. My parents followed slowly, moving like people in a dream they couldn't wake from. They sat together on the couch, holding hands like they needed to anchor each other. The silence stretched long and uncomfortable. I let it. I'd learned that silence is a tool. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait for someone else to break first. My father broke. "You're the landlord?" His voice cracked slightly. "I'm the property owner, yes. I've owned this house for the last 4 years. My mother made a small sound, almost a sob, but caught and swallowed. "You've known? This whole time?" "I approved your rental application, yes. I've been reviewing your payment history every month. I'm aware of the late payments, the medical expenses, the financial difficulties." I kept my voice even, factual. "I'm also aware that you're requesting a long-term occupancy guarantee." "Ethan." My mother leaned forward. "We had no idea. We never would have. If we'd known." "Known what?" I asked. "Would you have rented somewhere else? Would you have paid more reliably? Would you have been better tenants if you'd known your son was your landlord?" She flinched at the word son. My father found his voice. "This is why you're here? To humiliate us?" "No." I looked at him directly. "I'm here because you requested a lease modification. I'm here to discuss business. The fact that you're my parents is relevant only because it explains why I understand your situation better than most landlords would." "You can't do this," my father said. You can't evict us. We have rights." "I'm not evicting you. I'm here to discuss your request for long-term occupancy. But let's be clear about something." I leaned forward slightly. You have the rights granted by the lease you signed. Nothing more, nothing less. I've followed every law, every regulation. I've been, by any objective measure, a fair landlord. Your rent is market rate. The property is well maintained. You've received the extensions you've requested. But you let us struggle, my mother said. You knew we were struggling, and you just watched. What would you have had me do? I asked. Lower your rent below market value? Forgive late payments? Give you special treatment because we're related? That's not how business works. That's not how the world works. Those are lessons I learned when I was 18, standing on that porch with everything I owned in garbage bags. The air went out of the room. My mother started crying, quiet tears running down her face. My father looked at the floor. I didn't come here to revisit the past, I continued. I came here to discuss the future. You want a long-term lease. I'm willing to consider it. But I need to know that you can maintain the financial obligations. Your payment history has been inconsistent. Before I commit to a multi-year lease, I need assurance that you can meet the terms. My father looked up. There was something broken in his face, something that hadn't been there 10 years ago. We're trying. The medical bills, the debt. We're trying. I know you are. And I meant it. I've reviewed your finances. I know about the surgery, the car loan, the credit cards. I know you're barely making it work. Then why? My mother asked. Why are you doing this to us? I'm not doing anything to you. I'm running a business. You're tenants. This is a transaction. I paused. But since we're having this conversation, let me ask you something. Do you remember what you said to me when you threw me out? They said nothing. Dad said, You're 18 now. You're a legal adult. We've done our part. The rest is up to you. Do you remember that? My father's jaw tightened. Ethan, you were right, I said. The rest was up to me. And I figured it out. I built a career. I built a portfolio. I built a life. I did all of that without your help, without your approval, without your support. I proved that your plan wasn't the only path, that your certainty about my future was wrong. We were trying to protect you, my mother said. You thought I would fail. You were so certain that your way was the only way that you were willing to throw me out, rather than let me try mine. You chose your plan over your son. The words hung in the air, undeniable. And now, I continued, you're sitting in this house, paying rent to stay in a place you used to own, asking your landlord for security. The landlord who happens to be the son you threw away, the son who became exactly what you said he couldn't be. Successful, stable, secure. So, what do you want? My father asked. His voice was hollow. An apology? You want us to say we were wrong? I thought about that question. Did I want an apology? Did I need them to say the words, to admit their mistake, to acknowledge the damage they'd done? No, I said finally. I don't need an apology. Because here's what I've realized. You already know you were wrong. You've known for years. Every month when you write that rent check, you think about it. Every time you're late with a payment, every time you worry about whether you'll be evicted, you remember that you threw me out with nothing. And now I'm the one who controls whether you have a home. I stood up. I've made my decision about your lease request. They both looked up at me, fear and hope mixing in their faces. I'm going to approve a 2-year lease at the current rate. Fixed rent, no increases, with a standard clause about on-time payment. You'll have the stability you're asking for, provided you meet the terms. If you're late more than twice in that 2-year period, the lease terminates and reverts to month. If you're late more than 4 times, I begin eviction proceedings. Those are the terms. My mother let out a sob of relief. My father just nodded, his expression unreadable. My property manager will send you the modified lease by the end of the week. You'll have 10 days to review and sign. I gathered my documents. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss? Ethan. My mother stood up. Please, can we talk? Really talk? Not about business, about… No. I said it gently, but firmly. This isn't a reconciliation. This is a business arrangement. You're my tenants. I'm your landlord. That's the relationship we have now. That's the relationship you chose when you locked me out. We made a mistake, she said. We know that now. We were wrong. If we could go back. But you can't. I looked at both of them. And even if you could, I don't think you'd choose differently. You believed you were right. You believed so completely in your plan that you were willing to sacrifice your son for it. That's not something that changes with hindsight. That's who you are. I walked toward the door. They followed, helpless, lost. At the threshold, I turned back. For what it's worth, I don't hate you. I don't even resent you anymore. You taught me something valuable. You taught me that I could survive without you, that I didn't need your approval or your support to build something real. In a strange way, throwing me out was the best thing you ever did for me. It forced me to become someone I'm proud of. Ethan, please, my father said. You're our son. I was your son, I said. Now I'm your landlord. And as your landlord, let me give you some advice. Pay your rent on time, take care of the property, and honor the terms of the lease. If you do that, you'll have a home for the next 2 years. If you don't, you'll be looking for another place to live. It's that simple. I stepped out onto the porch, the same porch I'd stood on a decade ago with garbage bags and no future. But now, I was walking away by choice, with the deed to this house in my name and the power to decide what happened next. One more thing, I said, turning back. If you reach out to me outside of tenant-landlord business, I won't respond. If you try to contact me personally, I'll consider it harassment and act accordingly. All communication goes through my property manager. Are we clear? They nodded, both of them crying now, standing in the doorway of a house they no longer owned, held in place by a lease I'd approved, living here because I allowed it. I walked to my car. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The point had been made. As I drove away, I felt something settle inside me. Not satisfaction, not joy, just closure. The kind that comes when you realize you don't need anything from the people who hurt you. You don't need their apology, their approval, their regret. You just need them to understand that you survived them, that you thrived despite them. They threw me out at 18. I came back at 28 as their landlord. And now, at 32, I'm walking away again. But this time, I'm walking away with everything. The house is mine. The power is mine. The future is mine. And they're just tenants, paying rent to stay in a place they once controlled, living in a home that belongs to the son they threw away. That's not revenge. That's just reality. Some people rise. Some people fall. And sometimes, the person you counted out ends up being the one who owns the ground you're standing on. I don't need them to know they were wrong. They already know. I just needed them to see who I became anyway.